Okay, so I'm on location at a hot tub that somebody needed help with, and it might be a problem that you're having, so I thought I would make a quick video about it. I didn't even bring my microphone with me, so forgive the audio quality. Here's the hot tub. The problem is, if you feel on the sides of the hot tub, which is hard to do in a video, it feels like sandpaper. Why is that, and how do you fix it? That's what I'm doing to this hot tub, so that's what I thought I would make a quick video about. The issue is calcium, and specifically the way calcium interacts not only with pH, but especially alkalinity. And in this case, we're talking alkalinity and pH that is way too high. When you have alkalinity and pH that is way too high, and you have hard water, which is basically water with too much calcium in it, the calcium kind of sticks to the acrylic shell, and it feels like sandpaper, and it can be very tricky to get rid of. I'm going to get rid of it in this hot tub by doing a few different things. For starters, I'm going to add alkalinity and pH reducer, as well as calcium scale buildup remover. That's going to help me to dislodge the calcium particles that are stuck to the shell. Then, unfortunately for me, I'm going to have to use some brushes to kind of scrape it loose from the shell. Then I'm going to drain the water because those particles are now just floating around in the water, and we don't want them kind of getting stuck in the filters. Then I'm going to refill it and put it back to normal and make sure that the alkalinity and pH gets balanced correctly. And unlike my usual videos where I turn the jets off for the sake of the background noise, I'm having them on the entire time this time to help circulate the chemicals that I've added to the water, which are going to make it a little bit easier for me to scrape that stuff off the sides.
Okay, so I've got two different things here I'm going to try and use to free up the calcium on the shell. This one is a little brush, and the other one is going to help me to reach the further areas down, because I want to do this at least initially with the hot tub full of water. So the long one allows me to scrub on the floor, but with both of them I can also use the other side as a scraper. These are plastic, they're not metal, and I do want to be careful about not scratching the acrylic shell, but this is going to allow me to scrape up some of that residue that may not come off easily with just the brush side. And what I'm finding is that it's not just coming up with one pass of the brush. I'm having to go over the areas multiple times, both with the brush side and the scraper side, so this is going to take me quite a while.
One recommendation I do have for you is to add the calcium reducer and the pH and alkalinity reducer, and probably let that sit in your hot tub, leaving the jets on as often as you remember to turn them on for 24 hours or longer before you try and scrub this stuff off. My theory is that that will weaken the sediment that's stuck to the side of the shell and make it easier to scrape off, because what I'm finding today, tackling all of this right now in real time for you, is that it's very hard to scrape off. It is coming off, and you can kind of scrape it off with a fingernail, but this is a big hot tub. That could take a very long time. So add your chemicals and let it sit for a day or longer and see if that doesn't make it easier for you. Okay, so after scrubbing for about 30 minutes, I'm not finding a significant level of difference. It is coming off, but it's coming off really slowly. And I'd like to find a more efficient way to remove that calcium buildup. So one of the things that I thought about was using white vinegar. I did a little test where I diluted some white vinegar on a rag and wiped some of the surfaces that had the grit on there that were above the water, and it came off quickly and easily with a towel. So I can either drain this thing and go through it that way fully, or I also thought about adding the vinegar to the water and allowing it to circulate, and then going back to my scrub brushes. So I think I'm going to start with that and see if that does anything.
Okay, so what I'm finding is that adding the vinegar to the water is definitely helping. It's reduced the amount of calcium buildup by about 50%, but I actually think it will be easier for me to drain this hot tub completely and then climb in there with rags and vinegar and wipe it down that way, rather than just waiting for the circulation of the water with the vinegar in it to free it up. I think this will actually be a lot faster if I climb in there, so I'm going to drain it now.
So it's only been going about 5 minutes, and you can already see how much the water level has dropped. You can also see there's a fair amount of debris in here as well that I'll need to use my wet dry vac for to get out. And I can feel the sides. I still feel some of that sandpapery grit, but I'm guessing it's about 30% of what it was when I started. So one thing I noticed is I put a little vinegar on a scrub brush and tried scrubbing parts of the shell that were now above the water level. And then I tried putting some vinegar on a wet towel and wiping the shell that way to see which method worked better. And I have to say that the towel, despite being a lot softer and not nearly as bristly as the scrub brush, actually worked better. So I'm going to wait for this thing to be completely drained, and then I'm going to get in the hot tub and go through the whole thing with a towel and water and vinegar. What you could do is mix a 50-50 solution of vinegar and water in a bucket and put that in there with you. Okay, so as you can see, this thing is now about as empty as it's going to get with the submersible pump. I'll have to use a wet dry vac to get the little remaining pockets of water out. Then I'm going to start wiping with the towel and the vinegar and water solution to see if we can get the rest of this grit off. Okay, so as you can see, this thing is now completely empty, and now I'm going to start the process of wiping the shell down with the 50-50 mixture of vinegar and water, and let's see if we can get the remaining grit off. And with the water drained, you can really see some of the calcification around the nozzles here. That's what we're trying to get off, and that's what's also on a lot of the shell. Okay, so I have now completely wiped down the inside with that mixture of white vinegar and water. I've now gotten rid of about 95% of the grit. I do know that once I fill this thing back up again and top it off with chemicals and make sure the pH and alkalinity especially are well balanced, I know that over time, maybe a couple of months, the rest of that grit will go away completely. But before I'm ready to fill this thing back up, I do want to give it a quick rinse with the hose to get rid of the remaining residue of the vinegar, because I don't want that remaining in the water. So I'll wash all that down to kind of the footwell area, and then I'll use my wet dry vac again to get rid of that. Then we're going to fill this thing back up again and turn the power back on, and then I will be done. As of right now, it's been almost 2.5 hours since I started this project, so it took a little longer than I thought it was going to. I definitely could have saved some time if I had drained it to begin with, and then started with the vinegar and water and wiping it down with a rag.
Okay, I'm filling it back up again. Once it gets above the intake valves, as well as flowing into the filter chamber, I'll go ahead and cut the power back on, and then once it gets totally full, I'll go ahead and top all the chemicals off, making sure to adjust the pH and the alkalinity perfectly, because that is the moral of this story. If you don't keep your pH and alkalinity especially balanced correctly, this could happen to you. So always check those things every time you do a water change, and it's a good idea to check those things once a week also. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.